Rao sir, who is a senior journalist and political commentator. I heartily welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We also have Director of Morarji Desai National Institute of Yoga, Dr. I.V. Basmareddy sir with us. I heartily welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vandana. Thank you.
We also have Communication and Documentation Officer of Desai National Institute of Yoga, Mohammed Tayyab Alam sir with us. I heartily welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vandana.
Now, without any further ado, let us start the program with prayer. Om Sahna Vavatu Sahno Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now I would like to request Tayyab Alam sir to deliver welcome address.
Thank you, Dr. Vandana. Good evening, everyone. Friday webinar of Morarji Desai Institute of Yoga is one of the important programs of the Institute, which is usually appreciated by the yoga enthusiasts both India and abroad. The institutes invite eminent experts of yoga, modern medicine, diet and nutrition, media, and allied sciences to discuss upon important health issues and conditions. Today we have with us respected Parsa Venkat Rao sir, senior journalist and a political commentator, who will elaborate on the topic Amrit Mahotsav, India at the rate of 75. On behalf of Morarji Desai Institute of Yoga and my own behalf, it's my privilege to welcome you, sir, in our Friday webinar. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
I also extend my warm welcome to Dr. Iswar V. Basmareddy sir, Director, Morarji Desai Institute of Yoga, for his continuous guidance and support to organize this webinar. Welcome you, sir, in today's session. I also welcome all the staff, the students, and the social media team of the Institute and the social media friends for joining and promoting the event. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request Dr. I.V. Basmareddy sir, who is Director of Morarji Desai National Institute of Yoga, to deliver introductory remarks. Sir.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Esteemed today's speaker, Shri Parsa Venkateshwar Raoji, my colleagues in the Institute, Shri Tayyab Alamji, Dr. Vandana, my faculty members, student friends, and yoga enthusiasts who are joining this Friday webinar through various social media platforms of the Institute. My hearty welcome to you all. At the outset, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome and introduce today's eminent speaker, Sri Parsa Venkateshwar Rao Jr. Day after tomorrow, India is, we are going to celebrate 75th Independence Day. And it's a very proud moment. From the childhood, we are very fascinated to celebrate Independence Day, Republican Day, all the national days where every Indian should be proud of. Because there is an history, but every time it's a time to manthana, to analyze, look back, what we did, what we have to do, what are the mistakes. So any country, the country is made up of the people, if the people never do the analysis and they will not look back and correct their mistakes and move forward, there's no future for it. That's why this year Government of India optly taken Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav. India at 75 years of its independence. Many programs are being taken up, and at the same time, whatever the government, but during the last 75 years, India has achieved a lot, but we could have done much better. But where we stand today, this is a very, very important occasion. All the Indians should eager to understand and discuss and move forward. So accordingly, and we are very fortunate today to have one of our senior most journalist and political commentator, Parsa Venkateshwar Raoji. So very, very fortunate. I thank my colleague Shri Tayab Alamji to really identify a very suitable person for today's particular webinar, where we are going to celebrate our 25th Independence Day on Sunday. Parsa Venkateshwar Raoji is a Delhi-based journalist. He has worked with the Indian Express, India Today, DNA daily newspapers, and as a freelancer, he has written for the Times of India, Deccan Herald, ASN Age, Deccan Chronicle, and the Tribune. As a journalist, he is very popular for his analytical write-ups and awakening for both the rulers and the public. He also written several books, which include The Emergency, The Unpopular History, and Rajiv Gandhi to Narendra Modi, Broken Polity, Flickering Reforms, and most importantly, The Upanishads, An Introduction. These three books were published by very famous publishers. They are very popular. Today, it's my proud privilege to introduce and welcome Shri Parsa Venkateshwar Rao Junior Ji on behalf of the Institute, on my own behalf and my behalf of the faculty and students. Hearty welcome to you, Parsa Venkat Rao. I am particularly very much interested to listen to you and take a few words, a path breaking as an head of the institution, so that I can take up what we have left. At least one more year we have with us to achieve whatever we have not done in the past. With these few words, I once again hearty welcome to Parsa Venkateshwar Raoji, and I request him to address our faculty and students on the eve of 75th Day of Independence of India. Shri Parsa Venkateshwar Raoji.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baswaradi. Thank you, Tayab Alam and Vandana Singh, for inviting me and be part of this function, which is a proud function to celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's independence. We have to acknowledge right at the beginning that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when he came to power in 2014, he had identified two goals. One, the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi by 2019, that we must have a clean, sanitized country with toilets for everybody. And he has identified right at the beginning in 2014 that we should celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's independence, and we should be in a strong position. We are a strong economy and a strong polity. I think we are there almost, that we are a strong polity today, and we are a strong economy emerging as a leader in the world's politics. Uh, all the big powers and all the regional powers have to reckon with the position of India as a key player in the global politics. But it is always nice and it is always useful to go back and look at where we started 75 years ago and where we have arrived. There are lessons to be learned. There are things to be quite proud of. So both achievements and failures are an important part of the lessons which we inherit from the past, and they do help us in going forward into a brighter future. Just remember that when India became independent in 1947, it was a very paradoxical situation, that it was a moment of tremendous happiness that we became independent after the long colonial rule. And at the same time, it was a traumatic situation because of the partition. When India broke up into two countries, India and Pakistan, and there was a lot of violence, lot of killing, separation of people migration, forced to migrate from their home places. So it was a trauma, and it was also a great responsibility. Looking back, then we realize that in spite of the challenges, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the sorrows at the moment of the birth of Indian independence, we started earnestly in developing a democratic polity. The first thing, major thing that the Indian leaders at that time did was to get ready to write the Constitution of India. The Constituent Assembly was set up in 1946, and in 3 years' time, we were able to write a constitution that has survived all these years. And it's a great tribute to the independent India that we have struck to the democratic path. That is the first thing. And secondly, we have been able to create a constitutional democracy. That there is a book that guides us in our politics. There is a book that helps us in framing our democratic institutions, and we have kept to it. And the writing of the Constitution was a very important task, and it was not done by a single person. It was not done by a single party. It was done by all the leaders of many parties, of many different views. Even today, when we go back and look at the debates of the Constituent Assembly, they really make us sit up, because India became independent, but we did not become a uniform country. We did not have just one thought and one ideology. Everybody was able to speak up, and there was a clash of ideas. And one of the best things about a democracy is the clash of ideas. Clash of ideas, clash of ideologies, and even clash of personalities, because they were all giants, and each one of them respected the other person even when they differed with each other. And that is very important, the diversity of opinion. And the Constitution of India, I think, had become stronger because it was written by people with different views. If we had a constitution written by only one person or with one perspective or one ideology, then perhaps it would not have been as strong as the constitution is today after all these years and after all these amendments, 127 amendments in the last 75 years. So that is a major achievement, I feel, for independent India. And as we celebrate the 75th anniversary, I think we should count the making of the Constitution as a major achievement. Without the constitution, perhaps the Indian democracy might have survived, but not as stable as it has been the last 75 years. Look around you in the neighborhood. The other countries that became independent were not as fortunate as India has been. Pakistan set out to write a constitution, but before they could write a constitution, martial law was imposed there in 1958 by Field Marshal by Ayub Khan General, and an army person took over. But India not only completed the constitution, but it implemented the constitution. It adopted the constitution in 1950 on January 26th, and in 1952 we had the first general election. And the first general election is a joyous moment because it was the assertion of the will of the people. And what more can we ask for in a democracy? So the 1952 elections came, parties fought, of course, because the Congress was the major party which was part of the Indian freedom movement. They won the election. And they were to win the election in another two, 1957 and 62 and 67 and 71 also. But each time you will see that it was not really a one-party rule as it might appear if you look at the records. By the time we came to 1967, many of the state governments went out of the hands of the Congress. In Tamil Nadu, the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam formed the first non-Congress government in the then Madras state, which has later become Tamil Nadu. Then in 1957, we had the first communist government in Kerala. This is the political diversity, which is the sign of a vibrant democracy. And in Uttar Pradesh, we had in 1967 a coalition government led by the late Charan Singh, Samyukt Vidayak Dal. It was a coalition of many parties, which have now become split, but it was an assertion that in India, no one party can hold power for too long. Then we had another party which really asserted itself called the Swatantra Party, which was formed by the late Rajagopalachari, who fell out with Jawaharlal Nehru on political ideas and systems. He was one of the early people who favored a market economy, who did not approve of Nehru's socialism and the public sector. So it was, mind you, Rajagopalachari and Nehru were great colleagues and friends. But when it came to expression of opinions, they took their stand and they clashed. So this is India's democracy. So the Swatantra Party came to power in many states. It came to power in Rajasthan, it came to power in Madhya Pradesh, it came to power in Orissa. Of course, later on in 71, they've all lost, and Congress came back because Indira Gandhi gave the populist slogan of Garibi Hatao, and again, it looked as though there was no other alternative. But you will realize that the Indian democracy was not going to be a very boring or a placid thing or a uneventful thing. For whatever reason, there were a lot of problems in the 1970s all over the world, and there were problems even in India. And Jayaprakash Narayan, who was a colleague of Mahatma Gandhi, mind you, here again the diversity comes through. Jayaprakash Narayan started out as a socialist, did not believe in Gandhian non-violent politics, but he was converted to Gandhianism. And Mahatma Gandhi, in his own way, made Jayaprakash Narayan fast for 4 days to say that you have to atone for your sins before you can join my troop. So Jayaprakash Narayan followed the thing. And after independence, Jayaprakash Narayan gave up politics. He said, I'm going to follow the Gandhian part of rural reconstruction. And then he joined Acharya Vinoba Bhave, another colleague of Gandhi, who kept outside of politics but did a lot of political reconstruction work through his Bhudan movement. He went all over the country, walked, talked to the landlords and zamindars, and requested them to surrender land which could then be redistributed among the poor people. He may have not have succeeded fully, but that was the idealism that Gandhi inspired, and that idealism survived into the first years, many years after independence as well. So that was a major event. Secondly, what has happened was, when India became independent, when India remained a democracy, it was also a curiosity for all the people, because many of the Western experts believed that India cannot remain a democracy for too long, and that it will split, that it will become a dictatorship. But the democracy reasserted itself time and again, and though there was a very popular, charismatic leader like Nehru, the people knew when to vote him, whom to vote for, and how the Congress's numbers, majority got reduced election after election after election. And then in 1977, we have the first non-Congress government at the center, 10 years after the event has taken place in the states. In 1967, we have seen that many states had formed the non-Congress governments. Forming the non-Congress government is important, is to show that we are not a one-party state. A party might be dominant, a party might be very popular, but the other political alternatives come and they emerge. That is the, I think, the miracle of democracy. So 1977, the Janata Party was formed to after the emergency, which was there between 75 and 77. Mind you, Mrs. Gandhi won an overwhelmingly popular election in 1971, but within 5 years, it seemed to vanish into thin air, that popularity. People became unhappy, the economic situation was not good, and unable to do anything, she imposed the emergency. But once the emergency was taken off, people asserted their view. They just voted the Congress out of power from many parts of the country. The only two states that voted for the Congress in the 1977 elections were Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, then strong bastions for the Congress. And in Uttar Pradesh, Congress did not win a single seat in 1977, including that of Mrs. Gandhi. She lost the election. So that is the power of the will of the people, which has asserted itself. Yes, the Janata experiment did not last too long. It was short-lived because of the various contradictions that people, parties with too many diverse ideas perhaps cannot hold a stable government. Then Mrs. Gandhi came back into to power in 1980. And then Congress won the elections, two more elections in the 1980s. 1980 and after the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi in 1984, Rajiv Gandhi won a big mandate of more than 400 seats for a single party, which was again miraculous. And it looked as though the whole of opposition has been wiped out. But you just have to wait and see what happened in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the opposition, 1989 is the first time, again, a coalition opposition government is formed by VP Singh. Again, it showed that when it looked as though every other party has been wiped out and only a single party is dominating, the people of India throw up an opportunity for other parties to emerge and other things to form. So the VP Singh government may be weak, again, the same contradictions as with the Janata Party of 1977. It fell very early, did not last. It lasted only for 11 months. But again, it showed that Indian democracy was really sitting up and too alive, too vibrant to be pushed under the carpet. The whole of 1990s, we have seen coalition governments with a lot of political turmoil, political uncertainty. The government of P.V. Narasimha Rao, which formed in 1991 after the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, did not have a majority, but they had to carry out a very important turn in the Indian economic history by adopting the economic reforms. It could not be avoided. It was a crisis and it had to be gone through. And again, in Parliament, Congress did not have a majority, but many of the parties, and one of the major parties at that time was Bharatiya Janata Party, everyone supported the government and said, yes, the reforms are necessary. We may not approve of the reforms. We may not really believe in the reforms, but we know that this is the need of the country. And they went along and supported the government on the economic reforms. Many things went right and many things went wrong, but India took a very definite turn away from the previous governments, from what is called socialism. In 1956, the Congress had a session in Aberdeen, Madras, that is today's Chennai, where they adopted the resolution about the socialistic pattern of society. That was 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. Socialism really did not work out. And by the 1980s, it looked, just remember that this was the context of the Cold War. After the Second World War, the world was divided majorly into two major blocks. One was that of the democratic countries of the West, Western Europe, and of North America, and then that of the communists in the Soviet Union, that is today's Russia, and many of the East European countries. And it looked as though there is no other alternative. We have to fall in one line or the other. I think Nehru tried to walk the middle line and took the socialist pattern of society with democracy, because wherever the socialism was asserted or adopted, democracy went out of the window. Fortunately for India, democracy stayed, socialism failed. So it was a good bonus point for India that we have remained democratic all through. The economic development took place. The public sector was formed. Everybody now recognizes those who don't agree with socialism, those who don't agree with the philosophy of public sector, but perhaps that was inevitable and we needed. So to a certain extent, the public sector formed the basis. And even today, we see that many of the public sector institutions are the bulk, are the solid base for India's economy. For instance, the Indian Space Research Organization is a wonderful example of what an organization under the government aegis, but given the freedom, can do miracles and break into new frontiers. Similarly, we had the Bhabha Atomic Research Institute, where nuclear research was going on, and we developed some, but not entirely, nuclear reactors to generate electricity. So India was really reaching out to all the scientific possible solutions to get into the modern world. The industrialization has been very slow, very erratic. The public sector, some of them did well, some of them did very bad. So we have to really look back and see, perhaps could we have done differently? And many would argue, yes, we should have adopted the free market system early on, like Japan did, like Europe did. But we did not have the means, because after the independence, the Indian private sector also looked to the government for protection, for help, because they did not have sufficient capital to build the thing. So it's a mixed bag of experiment, trial and error. But throughout, this was inevitable in a nation. What is really miraculous about India is that in spite of the trial and error, in spite of the many failures, in spite of small successes, India survived, one as a single country, and the other that we survived as a democracy, which is the greatest thing to do. And that different parties emerged and political diversity remained as vital as ever. So after 50 years, in 1998, the Bharatiya Janata Party comes to power, though as head of the coalition, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee becomes the Prime Minister. Now, this is another beautiful turn, because the ideology of BJP is very different from that of the Congress. Now, in a democracy, you don't expect only one party and one ideology to survive. People make a choice. They choose one party, one ideology at one point of time. They choose another party and another ideology at another point of time, depending on the situation in the country, depending on the mood. And it looked like that, like many other countries, India also turned rightward, because the BJP's ideology of nationalism is on the right end of the spectrum, quite opposite to that of socialism and communism at the left end of the spectrum. And it was but natural, because communism and socialism sort of collapsed in Eastern Europe, in Soviet Russia. Soviet Union just vanished, and it looked like that socialism has really failed and that it did not succeed. Of course, socialism in Western Europe in another form, in the form of the welfare state, succeeded in the Scandinavian countries and in Britain and in US also. Remember that though Britain and the United States are considered free market economies, they went through a time when it was felt necessary by the political leaders there that the government must intervene and do a lot of things in terms of education, in terms of roads, in terms of healthcare, and in terms of agriculture as well. There was a man called F.D. Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States in 1930s. And to fight the Great Depression, there was an economic crisis and an economic crash in 1929. He brought what is called the New Deal. He allowed the government to enter the economy, set up institutions, and help people who were out of jobs. So that was the demand of the situation. Similarly, in England, after the Second World War, the Labour Party came to power, and it was the Labour Party that agreed to the independence of India as well. Labour Party started the welfare state, where the medical system, healthcare system was under the government, and the education system was nationalized, and many other things were done. So that ordinary people, people who didn't have the means, people who didn't have an access to these things, were able to go to the university, were able to make use of the government system of national health system, which became a very, very key thing to improve the economies of these two countries. Similarly, India went through it, but India didn't completely follow the welfare system. It could have followed, it should have followed that the health system should have improved and our education should have been more successful, but it took a very long time. And of course, again, there's a huge debate about this. Is it because we were a democracy and decisions were not easy to take, and that is why we went slow, and that it is better to be a democracy rather than taking the example of China, where they were able to impose the communist dictatorship and achieve certain goals, economic and social goals, which we could not achieve. But that is part of the story, part of the growing debate, and it's again a happy thing that in India the debates are still alive. People very passionately believe in free market economy. People still passionately believe, some of them though their number is diminishing, in the welfare state and in the socialistic ideals. But every government we see cannot follow only the one path. And one of the things we see in the government that came into power under Prime Minister Modi is that it's a fine-tuned balance between the market economy and the socialist imperatives of governing this country. Many of the policies of Prime Minister Modi cannot be termed free market, and many people are unhappy that it's not free market, and many people are happy that, thank God, that it's not free market. So that because the people still need the help of the government in many, many areas, especially in rural India, and we can see this happening in the toilet movement, where creating toilets all over the country, which is a basic necessity, building of the roads, and helping rural women with the Ujjwala scheme, like things like, so that you get the gas cylinders. It changes the whole pattern of life, and state intervention becomes very important. You cannot leave it to the market forces. In one of our interviews to a newspaper, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman remarked that the Prime Minister does not want to go to either extreme, either to the market extreme or the socialist extreme. So this is the pattern we have been following, and this is one of the beautiful things of the Indian democracy, that we are not fully free market economy, we are not fully a government-controlled socialist state, and we are trying to provide, India is trying to create its own model, its own balance of forces, and trying to maintain, because India, mind you, is a very diverse country. There are too many languages, too many religions, too many regional identities which cannot be overlooked, and too many social distinctions like the caste in the Hindu society. So you can't say, I won't believe in any of these, and enforce something uniform on the whole country. Because, one of the great things about the leaders of India is they realize the real challenge of governing this country is to how to carry all these diversity into one, and without without submerging the diversity, without wiping out the diversity, because diversity is our strength. Today, the most of the world, more than before, is looking to India because with the rise of the China under a communist regime, everybody looks to India as a successful democracy, as a successful market economy, and also as a successful socialist state, welfare state, which is able to cater to the needs of the people to the best of its ability. So 75 years of independence, this is only a general outline. There are many more things that have been done, many more things that have not been done, and the debate is going on. This I think is a very, very important issue, that we have survived as a democracy, that we still differ with each other very strongly. We still debate with each other, quarrel with each other. What is democracy if we don't debate and if we don't quarrel with each other? And that's what every party seems to realize. The latest monsoon session, which was washed out, might made people unhappy that look, Parliament is not working, the opposition is not helping. But after some time, everybody will realize it's only a small episode. But overall, the democratic structure in India is very strong, and that we have been able to carry out. And the reason why India is able to emerge as a strong economy, that it is able to take a leadership role in the world when the superpowers have gone and China is not yet a superpower. And it looks like that China can never be a superpower in the older sense of the term, because many other countries have emerged who will not accept any single country as a superpower. Even the Americans have recognized that they cannot play the role anymore. So it is to a country like India, which can strike a balance among all the powers in the world, because there is a group of global powers, there is no one single power, and India is the balancing factor. And it's a great tribute to India's democracy, India's polity, and India's democratic traditions, that in these 75 years, we have emerged with our democracy intact, with our territory intact, and with our diversity intact, that we have not lost out, and we are still quarreling with each other, we are still debating with each other, which is a wonderful thing. I think I should stop here, because there are many things which cannot be included in this short span of lecture. I thought the most important thing was our achievement of democracy, and how we have tried to retain the diversity, and still, in spite of all the problems, we work together and we are progressing to a brighter future. And everybody is convinced that India will become a very strong power in the future, not in the sense of it dominating the world politics, but in a sense that India provides hope for the smaller countries and other countries, that you can be a democracy, that you can have a very coordinated, very civilized polities. And this civilized polity, it must be remembered, can be traced back to India's ancient history, India's religious traditions, which goes back to the ancient Vedic system, goes back to the Buddhist and Jain traditions. And when Christianity, Islam, and Judaism and all these religions came to India, they also realized that they have to become part of this religious pluralism. And this religious pluralism still stands in good stead for India, because everybody is surprised at how we maintain this diversity. And that's a great achievement. And one of the big things we have done in the last 75 years is to retain that diversity, cultural diversity. And this is reflected in the strength of our democracy, in the strength of our democratic polity. I think I would stop here and take any questions that come up.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a really, really very beautiful lecture. Sir, if you would allow, I would take some few questions.
Yes, please.
सर आपने कहा कि रिलीजियस प्लूरलिज्म और डाइवर्सिटी इंडिया की एक बहुत बड़ी देन है, एक बहुत बड़ी चीज है। तो इसके अलावा भी सर हम डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री या ट्रेडिशन होने के नाते हम इस विश्व को और क्या दे सकते हैं? भारत की जो जनतांत्रिक व्यवस्था है, उससे विश्व और क्या प्राप्त कर सकता है सर?
हमारे पास ये है कि लोग ज्यादा मुल्क जो देखेंगे आप दुनिया भर में, वो एक जबान, एक तहजीब और एक रेस के हैं। हमारे पास जो है पहले से ही हर तरीके के लोग हैं, हर तरीके के जबाने हैं, हर तरीके के क्या कहते हैं रेसेस है। सो सब मिलके मजबूरन आप लोग कह सकते हैं कि आप लोगों को कोई ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं है, मजबूरन आप लोग साथ है, लेकिन मजबूरन रहते हुए भी हम एक क्या कहते हैं वो सिंक्रेटिज्म को एवॉल्व किए हैं कि सब मिलकर रह सकते हैं। इसका मतलब ये नहीं है हम एक दूसरे से बिल्कुल अलग नहीं है, अलग आइडेंटिटी रखते हुए साथ रह सकते हैं, ये बहुत बड़ी बात है। मैं समझता हूँ ये स्पिरिचुअल मैसेज जो है ना, क्योंकि ज्यादातर आप देखेंगे कि ये रिलीजियस स्ट्राइक बहुत ज्यादा हो गया है, कम से कम कुछ इलाकों में, कुछ कंट्रीज में, खासतौर पर फंडामेंटलिज्म, टेररिज्म, खासतौर पर मिडिल ईस्टर्न कंट्रीज में, उनके लिए, वहां के लोगों के लिए इंडिया एक बहुत बड़ा मिसाल है कि ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि आप कितने भी अलग हो, साथ रह सकते हैं। इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप एक दूसरे के साथ लड़ाई करें या एक दूसरे के कत्ल करें, लेकिन एक दूसरे को समझने में मतलब ये नहीं कि हम एक दूसरे के बन गए। यहाँ पे सवाल ये नहीं कि हम अपना धर्म छोड़ दिया और किसी धर्म को ले लिया, और कोई अपना दूसरा धर्म छोड़ के अपना दूसरे धर्म को लिया। अलग अलग धर्म रहते हुए इसके बावजूद साथ रह सकते। दिस हार्मनी ऑफ डिफरेंसेस ना, आई थिंक दैट इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग।
पर बिल्कुल सर, बिल्कुल सही आप कह रहे हैं सर, लेकिन डाइवर्सिटी जो है वो हमारी स्ट्रेंथ जरूर है, पर आपको ऐसा नहीं लगता कि कभी कभी ये एक हर्डल भी बन सकता है, क्योंकि बीइंग अ वेलफेयर स्टेट हमें एक एक व्यक्ति तक हर एक सुविधा, हर एक चीज पहुंचानी है, और एक सिस्टम में होने के नाते हमारे लिए एक मुश्किल की भी ये बायस बन जाती है कि हमें
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सही है, बिल्कुल सही है। ये क्या कहते हैं, हम किसी फैसले पर पहुंचना आसान नहीं है यहाँ पे, क्योंकि सबका अपना अपना राय है और सब समझते हैं कि हम ठीक है और दूसरे गलत है। लेकिन ये क्या कहना चाहिए, ये एक नेसेसरी इविल है। अगर हम वेलफेयर ये अच्छा करने के लिए हम अगर ये आवाजों को दबा दिए ना, हम हिंदुस्तानी नहीं रहेंगे, हम जमहूरियत नहीं रहेंगे। इसलिए ये बहुत मुश्किल है, इसलिए पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप बहुत जरूरी है। पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप वो है, वो सबको सुनती भी है, लेकिन मुश्किलों का एहसास भी है, लेकिन अपने क्या कहते हैं गोल के तरफ जाती रहती है, आहिस्ता ही सही, लेकिन सबको साथ लेते हुए। लेकिन आसान काम नहीं है यह, बिल्कुल आसान काम नहीं है, और इसके वजह से जो काम जल्दी होना चाहिए बहुत देर लगता है। लेकिन ये बिल्कुल ठीक है कि हम अपना रास्ता नहीं छोड़े। अपना रास्ता क्या है, सबको साथ ले जाना। जी
बिल्कुल सर, एक सवाल और है कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन के दौर में हम इस भारतीयता को कैसे बचा कर रख सकते हैं, और आज से 25 साल बाद जो है वो भारत को एक डेमोक्रेसी के रूप में आप कैसे देखते हैं?
ये एक करिश्मा है कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बावजूद हम अपना आइडेंटिटी बरकरार रखे, अपना कल्चर बरकरार रखे हैं, अपने मजहब बरकरार रखे हैं, तहजीब, अपने जबाने। आपको शायद आप लोगों को याद नहीं होगा, 1990s में ऐसा लगा कि जब टेलीविजन प्राइवेटाइज हो गया और स्टार टीवी आने लगे और अमेरिकन चैनल्स और अमेरिकन टेली सीरियल्स आने लगे, लोग समझे थे कि हमारे जबाने तो खत्म हो गई, कि हम सब अंग्रेजी सीखना पड़ेंगे और ये अमेरिकन टीवी सीरियल देखेंगे। लेकिन आप देखेंगे कि हर एक जबान में, हर एक लैंग्वेज में टीवी चैनल्स उभरे, और इतने उभरे कि गिनती करना भी मुश्किल है। और एक एक टीवी चैनल एक एक जबान में अलग अलग प्रोग्राम्स जनरेट किए, प्राइवेट चैनल्स। इतना कंपटीशन बना, जो लोग डर रहे थे कि हमारे जबानें खत्म हो जाएंगी ग्लोबलाइजेशन की वजह से, आज देखेंगे कि हर एक जबान इतना मजबूत हो गया है कि अंग्रेजी देखना बंद कर दिए लोग, बहुत ज्यादा लोग। वो अपने जबान में टेलीविजन प्रोग्राम्स देखना पसंद करते हैं, और अपने जबान में टेलीविजन सीरियल्स और सिनेमा देखना चाहते हैं। ये एक मिसाल है कल्चरल फील्ड में कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन कहाँ तक जा सकता है और कहाँ रुक जाता है।
बिल्कुल सर, जैसे कहा भी गया है कि एक कोई बात है जो हस्ती मिटती नहीं, हमारी सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे ज़मा हमारा, जहाँ
अलामा इकबाल का बहुत बड़ा ये
हमारे ऊपर ही, हमारी भारतीयों के ऊपर ये लागू होती है सर शायद।
या बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
जी सर, एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन मैं पूछना, अगर
जरूर
आप अलाउ करें तो पूछ सकती हूँ।
जरूर जरूर।
सर, इंडियन नेशनलिज्म जो है, भारतीय राष्ट्रवाद जो है, वो सर अन्य देशों से किस तरीके से अलग है? अगर आप सर इस पे कुछ प्रकाश डाल सकें तो।
आप देखेंगे कि दूसरे मुल्कों में उनका राष्ट्रवाद जो है एक जबान, एक रेस, एक मजहब पे था। अगर जापानीज को देखेंगे, जापानीज नेशनलिज्म में जापानीज रेस, हालांकि वहाँ बुद्धिस्ट भी है, लेकिन वहाँ नेशनलिज्म इतना बढ़ा हुआ है कि वो जापानीज जबान एक ही जबान है, हाँ उनका एक ही कल्चर है, तो उसी पे फोकस था। वैसे ही आप जर्मनी देखेंगे या फ्रांस, किसी भी यूरोपियन कंट्री देखेंगे, उनके पास डाइवर्सिटी नहीं है। मैं 2004 में पाकिस्तान गया था सार्क कॉन्फ्रेंस के लिए, वहां पे एक साहिबा कह रही थी हमारे पास डाइवर्सिटी नहीं है। ये अफसोस की बात है जो आप लोगों के पास है। तो डाइवर्सिटी जो है ना, लोग इसलिए तड़पते हैं कि यूरोप से भी यहाँ पे आके देखते हैं लोग इतने जबाने, इतने अलग अलग तरीके और इतने अलग अलग मजहब, तो उनके लिए बड़ा अच्छा लगता है, क्योंकि उनके मुल्कों में बहुत ही रेजिमेंटेड है, बहुत ही यूनिफॉर्म है, बहुत ही नैरो है। कभी कभी उनका नैरो माइंडेडनेस भी इसी वजह से आता है। इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि हम फरिश्ते हैं और हम सब क्या कहते हैं आइडियलिस्ट है। हमारे पास भी लड़ाई करते हैं, हम एक दूसरे से ये करते हैं, लेकिन ओवरऑल ना हम समझ जाते हैं कि ठीक है भाई, हम साथ रहना है, हम अलग है लेकिन साथ रहना है, ये बड़ी बात है।
जी सर, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सही कहा आपने सर। सर, हमारे संस्थान में आने के लिए और इतना सुंदर व्याख्यान देने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
थैंक यू।
सभी दर्शकों ने पूरा चैट बॉक्स जो है वो भर गया है आपकी इस लेक्चर की प्रशंसा से और बहुत सारे प्रश्नों से।
बहुत शुक्रिया, बहुत शुक्रिया।
अब मैं संस्थान के निदेशक,
Excellent.
जी सर, मैं निदेशक
Thank you
महोदय
very
से
much,
अनुरोध
sir.
करूंगी कि कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क्स सर दें।
No, thank you very much. You have enlightened with so many things. Just I was 10 minutes. I was attending one important call.
Yeah.
I will go through again and go through the Facebook page tonight and go through. Thank you very much, Venkateshwar.
I'm glad that you have given me this opportunity to talk to you and share my thoughts.
Thank you. Much obliged.
आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। इसके
Thank
साथ
you.
संस्थान के निदेशक महोदय डॉक्टर IV बसवरेड्डी सर का भी हार्दिक धन्यवाद देना चाहूंगी, जो इस तरीके के कार्यक्रम के आयोजन में हमेशा हमारा सहयोग करते हैं और अपने व्यस्त कार्यक्रम में से समय निकालकर हमारे बीच आते हैं। साथ ही हमारी टेक्निकल टीम का, हमारे संस्थान के संचार एवं प्रलेखन अधिकारी महोदय मोहम्मद तैयब आलम सर का और हमारे सभी दर्शकों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद जो आज वो हमारे साथ इस कार्यक्रम में जुड़े। अब कार्यक्रम की समाप्ति शांति पाठ के साथ। ओम सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Vandana. All the best.
Kind of you.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you.